wasn't even planning to stop that night. I'd been driving home after a long shift on a cool autumn evening, just a few days before Halloween, cutting through the back roads that run between endless stretches of desert in the region where I live. Miles of sand and jagged rock formations that catch the last bit of moonlight like gigantic pieces of broken glass scattered across the earth. Out there, the highway looks like it's suspended in emptiness, nothing but the hum of the engine and the faint crackling of the asphalt beneath your tires to remind you that you're still moving. Then, out of nowhere, I saw something I had never seen before, despite the countless times I had made this very drive. A glow coming from off in the distance, flickering reds and yellows, flaring and dimming with a rhythm that felt too deliberate to be natural. I didn't know what it was, but something deep in my gut felt drawn to the light, like it was reaching out for me, silently calling for me to come closer. At the time, I wrote it off as my bored mind starving for a bit of adventure in the midst of my monotonous, never-ending routine of work, sleep, and long drives through the empty desert. Looking back, though, I can't shake the feeling that whatever drew me in that night wasn't actually curiosity or the thrill of adventure, but rather something else, maybe even something supernatural. The light show shimmered brilliantly through the pitch-black desert night sky, quite a ways off in the distance, far from the paved road that stretched on endlessly ahead of me. The sense of giddy curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to put my old Jeep Wrangler's off-roading capabilities to the test, veering off the paved path and heading toward the dazzling lights, cutting across the sand and brush, the tires kicking up clouds of dust that glowed orange in the reflection. I don't know what I was expecting to find, but as I got closer, it quickly became apparent that the source of the lights was a warehouse-sized building, covered in elaborate decorations and obviously constructed to look like a real old, worn-down house, despite being twice the size. A vinyl banner stretched across the front that read, "The Last House on Dry Creek Trail, the most realistic haunted experience of the year." A haunted house. Why would they put one here, of all places? I thought to myself, but I had come this far, and something about that light felt like it was waiting for me. The Last House on Dry Creek Trail. I'd never heard of it before. I looked it up, but it wasn't on Google Maps, and there were no reviews I could find anywhere online. I told myself it was probably one of those pop-up haunted houses that operate for a few weeks, charge too much, and close down before anyone can complain. In retrospect, though, I wish I had paid more attention to the warning signs. As I approached the front of the building, I saw a man sitting behind a small ticket booth, positioned beside the main door on what was the massive building's imitation of an old, dilapidated, Victorian-style front porch. He was motionless until I walked up. His face was pale under the glow of the harsh, vibrant lights. He didn't smile or even look up. He just slid a paper wristband across the counter.
"Single admission?"
he asked in a flat tone. "Yeah," I said, but before I could even finish the word, the massive front door swung open like it had been waiting for me. I never even paid an admission fee. I guess I pay after, I thought to myself, making my way toward the open doorway. As I took my first step forward, though, the man at the ticket booth finally looked up. His eyes caught the light just enough to glint dull silver.
Have fun,
He said, a thin, knowing smile creeping its way across his face.
Just don't overstay your welcome.
What's that supposed to mean? I thought to myself. The logical part of my brain was telling me it was probably just some generic line he said to everyone who came through. But I somehow just couldn't shake the feeling that it was kind of a weird thing to say to a customer. Wouldn't they want me to spend more time here? Why else would they make it so huge and elaborate? I was starting to get second thoughts about this whole thing, but as I stepped inside, everything went dark and the front door slammed shut behind me. Then a pre-recorded voice came through the speakers, deep, muffled, like it was playing from the bottom of a well.
Welcome to the last house. Once you enter, you cannot leave until you find the exit.
Classic haunted house talk, I thought to myself, feeling my nerves start to calm and the sense of excitement and curiosity start to creep back in. I began making my way forward through the winding, dark, narrow hallway, expecting an actor to jump out at any point, but nothing happened. Then a dim strobe light above started flickering, and I realized the hallway was lined with warped and angled mirrors on both sides. My reflection flashed in fragments, arms, legs, face, slightly out of sync with my movements. It was impressively disorienting. I caught a glimpse of my reflection in one of the mirrors that looked wrong. It wasn't lagging or glitching. It was just completely still and smiling broadly, despite the serious expression I knew I wore. The strobe flickered again, and my reflection went back to normal. How did they do that? I thought to myself, inspecting the mirror, to find nothing amiss. Just plain old reflective glass, like any of the others. Was it just my mind playing tricks on me? I decided to keep moving. The next room opened up into what looked like an old living room. There was a couch covered in dust, a small TV in the corner, and the smell of something burnt in the air. On the screen, a black and white security feed showed the same room I was standing in. Same furniture, same lighting. Except in the feed, someone was sitting on the couch, their head turned toward the camera. I looked over. The couch was empty, but the springs creaked, slow and deliberate, as if someone invisible had just stood up. I laughed nervously. The effects were good, too good for just a no-name haunted house thrown together in a few short days. As I moved toward the next doorway, I caught something else on the screen. The timestamp read October 29th, 11:26 p.m. That was the exact time on my phone as well. The hallway beyond was long and completely dark, except for a faint red glow at the end. I could hear people ahead of me, laughter, a few screams, so I followed. Their voices sounded close, but never seemed to get louder. Every time I turned a corner, the sound shifted, like the walls were rearranging around me. The red glow pulsed faintly ahead, like a heartbeat buried inside the walls. The laughter I'd been following suddenly cut off. leaving only the faint hum of electricity and my own breathing. I slowed down, realizing I hadn't seen another person since I entered. For a haunted house this elaborate, it was quiet, eerily quiet. Not just the absence of sound, but a suffocating silence that felt almost alive. When I finally reached the end of the hallway, the light revealed a staircase leading up. A crooked sign on the wall read, "Second floor, don't stop now." Written in a deep, glistening, crimson-red paint that looked uncomfortably fresh. I hesitated. My gut was telling me there was something off about this place and that I should turn around. But then again, was that not the whole point of a haunted house? This place was literally designed to scare me. I found myself standing at the foot of the staircase, debating what to do next. After a brief moment, however, that same giddy curiosity I'd been feeling came creeping back in, drawing me toward the second floor before I even realized I was moving. The second floor looked completely different. The walls were wallpapered, furniture was overturned, and a constant low static played from an old radio in the corner. For the first time since entering, I heard movement, footsteps scuffling behind a door at the end of the hall. I let out a small, relieved laugh. Finally, an actor. When I stepped closer, the door slammed open. Out burst a man, screaming like a banshee, his clothes torn, face painted gray, eyes wide and bloodshot. He grabbed my shoulders and shook me hard before stumbling back into the wall. I jumped back, my heart nearly leaping out of my chest. "Jesus, man," I gasped. "You got me. You really got me." He didn't reply. He just stood there, chest heaving, staring through me with those empty, hollow eyes. His mouth twitched like he wanted to say something, but then he snapped his head toward the far end of the hall, flinched, and bolted down a side door so fast it barely looked human. For a moment, I just stood there, trying to calm down. I thought the actors weren't allowed to make physical contact with us. I muttered. Something was definitely off with this place. This was no ordinary haunted house, and the feeling of fear coursing through my gut wasn't by design. That man's reaction, the hollow emptiness in his eyes, it made him seem almost inhuman. Despite this realization, however, I pressed on. By this point, I knew I should have turned back, but I swear I just couldn't stop. It was like I was being dragged forward by a magnetic pull. Somewhere ahead, I heard a faint sobbing. A woman's voice, quiet, trembling. It echoed down the hallway, fading in and out like a bad radio signal. I followed it against my better judgment. At the end of the hall stood a door marked "Employees Only." The sobbing was coming from behind it. When I reached for the handle, it turned on its own and creaked open just enough for me to see inside. There was a hallway which led on further than I could see. On the immediate right, there was a small room, cluttered with broken props, fake cobwebs, and old costumes draped over mannequin torsos. A single fluorescent bulb flickered overhead, casting everything in a sickly yellow haze. The crying stopped the second I stepped into the small room. At first, I thought it was empty. Then I noticed her, a woman crouched in the corner, her back to me. She wore a tattered dress like something out of a Victorian ghost story. Her long hair hung in matted clumps that shimmered under the light overhead. For some reason, I just couldn't find my voice in that moment, so instead, I reached out to her slowly, and just as my fingers began to brush against her shoulder, she turned sharply to face me. Her skin looked pale and colorless, and her eyes, they didn't look at me so much as through me.
"You shouldn't be here,"
she said, her tone harsh and unsteady, like she was forcing the words out through fear. The words froze me in place. Her voice was stern, but not angry or scripted. It sounded pleading, like she really meant it. "Look, I didn't mean to wander in," I finally managed to stutter out. "I just heard you crying and thought."
"You must leave now,"
she said, speaking quietly.
"If you stay too long, you won't be able to leave. Go, now."
I stumbled back toward the door I had just come through, but it slammed shut before I could reach it. I pulled on the handle, but it didn't budge. My heart was pounding now. I tried to tell myself it was all part of the show, an elaborate trick meant to scare guests into feeling trapped. I'd read about haunted houses that use psychological tactics like this, manipulating your senses, disorienting you, blurring the line between what's real and what isn't. But the thing is, I could feel something else there with me, not the woman, something larger, watching, listening. I finally snapped out of whatever trance seemed to have fallen over me and booked it. I didn't care in which direction. I just knew I had to move. I swear I've never run so fast in my life. The next few minutes were a blur of disjointed rooms, a kitchen with rotting food laid out on the table, a nursery filled with broken toys that moved just slightly when I wasn't looking, a hallway wallpapered with photographs of people I didn't recognize. Every room felt colder than the last. At one point, I caught my reflection again, this time in a window. I looked pale, sickly, like I hadn't slept in days. And yet, when I blinked, the reflection didn't blink with me. It just stared. That was when I started to wonder if the haunted house was even a building at all. Maybe it was a place in my head, something designed to feed on fear, to twist curiosity into submission. Maybe I was still sitting in my car somewhere out in the desert, dreaming this whole thing. I actually hoped that was true, because the alternative meant that everything happening was real. Somewhere behind me, a loud crash broke the silence, the sound of something heavy falling. I turned just in time to see movement in the doorway behind. The man from before, the actor who'd grabbed me, was there, standing perfectly still, his face slack and colorless. I tried to speak, but before I could, he lifted a trembling hand, waving at me desperately. The sound that escaped his lips didn't contain any legible words. It was more of a hoarse groan, his voice cracking like paper. It was clear from his gesture, though, and from the frantic look in his eyes, that he was telling me that I needed to hurry. Then he collapsed. Not fainted, not fell. Collapsed, like a puppet whose strings had been cut. I didn't stop running. I had no idea where I was going, and I didn't care. I just needed out. The hallways twisted and warped as I moved, doorways appearing where walls should be, lights flickering on, only to reveal new corridors that hadn't existed before. Somewhere in the chaos, I saw the crying woman again. I could see her face more clearly now. There was a kindness there, a glimpse of something human buried beneath the hollow exterior. She stood pointing. I followed her gesture, and as I passed her, she too collapsed, just as the other actor had. Taking off down a narrow, slanted corridor, I eventually arrived at a flickering exit sign. I breathed a sigh of relief as it came into view. The air on the other side hit me like ice. Suddenly, I was outside again. My Jeep was still parked where I'd left it, coated in a fine layer of dust. I didn't look back. Not even for 1 second. I climbed into the Jeep and started the engine. The headlights cut through the sand and rock, painting the desert in soft gold. As I drove away, I glanced at the clock on the dashboard. 3:15 a.m. It read. What? I thought to myself in shock. I could have sworn I hadn't been in there more than 30 minutes. When I got back home, I went straight to the shower, stepping right in with my clothes still on. I spent a good while just sitting there on the shower floor, letting the warm water pour over me, trying to process everything that had just happened. The next day, I drove back to the same spot in the daylight. I needed to know it was real. I found the turnoff, the same path I'd taken through the sand, but when I got to the end, there was nothing, no building, no lights, no ticket booth, just empty desert. I sat there for a long while, engine idling, trying to make sense of it. It wasn't like there was a shell of a building they could have used to set up the haunted house. No, there was just nothing, not even a sign that there had ever been something. I couldn't stop thinking about the actors I had encountered, the desperation in the voice of the actress I talked to, the way they both fell completely limp after trying to help me escape. It all felt too real, too desperate, like they weren't acting at all. I have a theory, and I know it sounds crazy. I doubt anyone will believe me. Hell, I don't even know if I believe myself, but my theory is that those people weren't actors at all. I think they were people who had fallen in to the haunted house's trap, like I so nearly did. The longer I stared at that open stretch of land, the more I realized how stupid I'd been. I used to think my life was dull, that the quiet routines and empty drives were something to escape. After that night, I'd never felt more grateful for silence. I'll never take for granted the comfort and safety of my boring life ever again.